I know
It's
a lot of people have
huge,
huge...
though.
I know, people are going to hate me in the comments for this.
We both agreed on that. The hype is a little bit too high on this one. There were a little bit too many like plot confusions and inconsistencies.
The internet has decided the top 235 best fantasy books of all time. We are not going to go through all of them today. We are going through the top 15. But as the internet says, it's fact, it's doctrine, it's for real.
10,000 votes went into this data, so you know it's legit.
Oh, it's gotta be legit. The internet is always right? That's what everyone says.
Yeah.
If it's on the internet, it's true. So it's true. So let's dive right into it with the number 15 book. You want to start with that?
I'll do it. Number 15 is Dune by Frank Herbert. That is one we featured on the channel, so it has to make the top 15 list. Probably why it bumped into the top 15, actually.
Oh, it could be, actually.
It has nothing to do with the classic from the 60s and 70s.
Nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with the beautiful covers and different versions that they've made. We've reviewed the book Dune. It was fantastic. We really enjoyed it. Not to mention the movie.
Movie was phenomenal. We had nothing but good things to say about it. Dune 2 came out right when we were reviewing the book.
That's right.
What a time to be alive.
If you haven't read the book, it is a fantasy book or sci-fi book. Excuse me, not fantasy. It's more sci-fi, right?
Definitely more sci-fi.
Yeah. Very political, very interesting. We've only read the first book in the series, though. Tune in. We will probably read Dune Messiah before the next movie comes out as well.
Oh, absolutely. We're probably going to read, the first 3 or 4. It sounds like it gets weird.
So are we going to read all 3 or 4?
I don't know. There's a part of me that's so curious because everyone says it just gets super crazy.
I know. People just always say, I'm like, it's weird. I'm like, how weird can it get? They're like,
exactly. You got to find out.
You're like, they always look at me like, worm people, dude. I'm like, what in the world?
Pretty weird.
Okay, so we'll see. Okay, next one on this list is the Red Rising Saga. If you have not read this series, we have just started reading it.
We're currently reviewing this on the channel.
Yep, we just read the first book, we've read the second book, and very soon we'll be posting a review of the third book. This series, phenomenal so far. I was completely blown away. Yeah. I've been recommended this book at work several times. It's actually where this came from for me. I was at work and telling people, big Sanderson fan over here, and they said, man, have you read the Red Rising Saga? I'm like, no, I've never heard of it. Like, it is super good, like Hunger Games, like Ender's Game, but just takes it to a whole nother level.
I think this one, for me, I always got it recommended by saying, like, oh, it's about, like, colonizing Mars, and then, like, kind of, but not really. That's one of the things that threw me a little bit when we started reading it. Yeah, now we're on the third book, so I feel like we have a better sense of what's actually in it, and to me, it's like Red Rising Saga is about a space empire.
Oh, yeah.
Like the craziness that would exist in a space empire.
I'll probably take a lot of that blame because I was reading like the summary and I'm like, yeah, it's like colonizing Mars. I play the game Terraforming Mars and things like that.
Same thing.
Which is super cool because I'm actually able to learn about where the locations are at on this place of Mars, and in the book and stuff like that. They talk about the moon of Phobos, and I'm like, and Olympus Mons. And these are all locations that I know from playing a board game. And
that's crazy.
So if the board game is accurate, the book is accurate, then so if one is informing the other, then maybe you could say it's accurate. I still think
that's sweet that they combine, they have those things linked.
Yeah, so. I think it's super cool. So you can know actual locations, actual things, but it's just besides all of that, it's just a super, super cool book. Definitely becoming one of my favorites quick.
Interesting that, though, 15 and 14 are like 2 of our favorites.
I know.
That was kind of quick to knock those off the list.
You're like, oh, shoot. What do they got left here?
Well, number 13 is the Kingkiller Chronicle. Going right into another one that we recently reviewed on the channel. We recently reviewed book 1 of the Kingkiller Chronicle, which is Name of the Wind.
Yep,
we actually have it up here.
Yeah. It was a good book. People mention this book a lot because of all of the prose that are in the book. They say he's got beautiful prose.
They talk a lot about the author.
Yes. They say that Patrick Rothfuss has amazing prose, good writing style, and the story's pretty good, the world building, and I would agree. The prose is incredible, the world building is great. Honestly, though, story didn't really hit for me. I don't really see why this is so massive on BookTube. I know a lot of people have huge... I know, people are going to hate me in the comments for this.
We both agreed on that. The hype is a little bit too high on this one. There were a little bit too many like plot confusions and inconsistencies. Not inconsistencies, but like conveniences, I should say.
Yes.
That was one of my bigger complaints with it. But, I mean, overall, they're not wrong. He's a great writer.
Oh, yeah.
So I think people are a little frustrated too, a little salty because he hasn't finished the series.
Can you imagine? Has it been like 10 years?
It's been a long time. That's why we never read the second book. 'Cause we're like, everyone says don't get stuck on a cliffhanger.
Yeah. Oh, man, I can't even imagine. So maybe if he finishes that third book, it'll give us some incentive to read that book.
Oh yeah, if he announces a release date for book 3, we'll be all over book 2.
Oh yeah, for sure.
That's not even a question.
You got it. I mean, it's number 13 on the list. So, but number 12 is Harry Potter.
Now
Made it to the list.
Is a classic.
It is a
It's
classic.
a classic in fantasy.
Every single time I see Harry Potter on TV, and because I just got a Peacock subscription, they've got all the Harry Potters on there right now. I saw them on there, and I'm like, ooh, Malia, maybe we should read through these. Malia's my wife. Or watch through these again. And every single time just gives you just a blast of nostalgia.
Did you watch through them again?
We have watched a few here and there,
Nice.
but like we just need to go through straight from beginning to end. And I haven't done that again like since originally came out.
My wife reads all of the Harry Potter books every year.
Every year?
Every single year.
Okay, so does she have the new audiobooks that I've heard like people rave about?
Yes.
Or is that to come?
No, I think they're going to be doing a new set of graphic audio style with the actual actors.
With like 100 different actors,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. That hasn't come out as far as I know.
Did you say like actual actors like Daniel Radcliffe and
As far as I had heard, like they've just
Wow.
done these like announcement things, but I think they're going to be the actual actors.
Okay.
And then the ones that she has are from like the same audiobook reader. Everyone loves this audiobook reader though. I don't even know who it is.
Yeah.
But she listens to them every single year. Reads/listens. Some reading, some listening.
Wow, massive fan there.
Huge fan. Absolutely loves it.
Oh man.
We went to Harry Potter World in London when we were out there.
in London.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
I
a good
thought you
time.
were going to say Florida, but like
No, it's a good time.
Wow.
That was where they actually filmed a lot of the movie.
that is really cool. Do they have different places to go to, parks and stuff too?
Well,
or-
not parks. It was literally like more of a museum
Okay, cool.
because it's all of their sets and all of the places that they actually filmed the characters, and it's cool because they have some of the things automated still. So you
Yeah.
can kind of see how they did it with like the mechanisms. They have the Forbidden Forest where you've got light and like day and night. It's all indoors.
Yeah.
But they have all the lights perfectly color matched, so you can like flip a switch and it's like now it's day.
Yeah.
And flip a switch and it's night, and it's wild. You feel like you're in the movie. You can go straight from day into night, and you're like, I know this scene because I have seen this.
Yeah.
And then you flip it to the day, and you're like, it's just kind of spooky how good it is.
Oh my gosh.
That was fun.
That's really cool. I cannot believe I haven't talked to you about this. I had no idea
Yeah.
that you'd done this.
Oh yeah.
Like, this is really cool. The last thing I have to say about this, though, is I was a bigger fan of the... I read the books, but I loved the movies so much. But I had a friend tell me once, and she had watched the last movie, and she's like, I'm so sad that the last movie has come out, because every single year you would get a trailer for Harry Potter, for the next Harry Potter movie coming out.
That was a good time.
And she said, she's like... Now I can no longer go to the movies and say like, well, the movie was bad, but that Harry Potter trailer, man.
That was a different time when you were like getting psyched about the trailers that would come out during certain
You
movies.
had to show up to the movie before so you could see the
same way
trailers.
about Marvel. You'd be like, oh, the next Marvel movie's coming out. You got the trailer coming out.
You don't really get that much anymore.
No, everything is just like a spin-off of a spin-off of the same movies.
the worst. And there's so much good content out there. They could make really cool stuff. I mean, it's spin-offs off of books, but I mean...
Yeah,
it's
everyone
different.
loves that because it's almost a different audience sometimes. You got all these books. I think about Dune and the huge success of the Dune movies. Yes, they've tried it a couple of times, but with the technology they have nowadays, they've made blockbuster movies off of that series.
Yep.
Think about how they need to just scroll BookTube on YouTube, find the popular ones, and go crazy with it.
Well, and the reason why this works so well is because it's so based on story. The story is already built, everybody already loves the story, and then you're just putting in the cinema on top of that.
Yeah.
And so many movies these days decide to just put the cinema and explosions and action without having any story at all on it.
But people are drawn to the story.
Yes.
Even if they don't realize it. Like, people think that they just want, like, the big name actor and the explosions.
Yep.
But really what brings you into a movie is a good story.
Oh, for sure. So, love it.
Harry Potter is a good story. Those movies are going to be classics forever.
Yep.
Okay, on to number 11, which means we're at The Gentleman series by Scott Lynch. If you haven't read... I haven't read these.
I have not read them either. Yeah.
Apparently, there's 16 total works.
16?
9 primary works and 16 total. So, like,
oh my goodness.
7 that are just iffy.
I thought the Wheel of Time was long.
How long is the Wheel of Time?
12 books. Now,
I bet we'll get there.
It's like 12 or 14.
We'll foreshadow a little. It's on the list.
I'm going to get roasted in the comments. I have only read the first 3, so I'm not sure. All I know is that Sanderson wrote the last 3 of the books.
Okay.
So,
because I don't know anything about Scott Lynch, to be fair.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about the synopsis, if anyone hasn't read them like me, it says each book in the series has a beginning and an ending, but references events and characters from the previous books in the series. It's recommended you read the books in order. That to me means it's like a Marvel type. You could watch the Captain America movie and be like, that was a great movie.
Yeah.
But you could also have watched it after Iron Man 1 and be like, oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
So maybe it's similar
interesting.
to that.
And it's interesting that it got rated so high because books, for me at least, that you have to re-get used to new characters, new setting and everything all of a sudden like from ground zero every single time. I mean, that can be difficult. That can be jarring for each new book. But it's still rated high, which is good. The only book that I've read that was kind of similar to that idea was the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. So this is one of the OG sci-fi books, and it takes place over the course over, I think it's 1,000 years, maybe 10,000. Wow. And every single time you jump to in the next chapter, it's like another generation of people. And they reference events that happened in the past. But when you read it, we'll have to read it sometimes. It is so fascinating the way they do it. It's really cool how they're putting the puzzle together. And you're like, wow, this must have happened over here. Or what's going to happen next? And it's just so interesting.
It's got to be hard to write like that.
Oh, yeah. You know what's even harder to do is film like that. So, like, imagine. Because
your cast would be insane.
I know.
So many people.
They actually just created a TV show on Apple Plus of the Foundation series. And I tried watching it. Awful. It's not even close to the book.
There's your quick review.
Yeah,
if
awful.
You haven't seen it
Hot
yet.
take. Terrible. Don't watch it. But what they tried to do to make it work, because I was watching an interview and they said this book was previously unfilmable because it took place over so long.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem is that characters don't carry over from like from beginning to end. And in TV shows and movies, you need consistency of character to really get into it. And so
episodic series probably makes more sense, right?
Exactly. Well, and so that's what they do is so they had characters who I think there's characters who don't live forever, but they did a really, really interesting thing with the Emperor, how he is basically cloned. And so they have like a boy version of him, a man, and an old man. And they keep having, whenever the old man dies, they have a new son that's born. That's the same clone, and so the Emperor's the same guy.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a really creative way of doing it.
That
part of the story I really liked, but it's fascinating.
Wow, that's cool. Well, I mean, has nothing to do with Scott Lynch's books, but
yeah, of course,
we'll get there.
Yeah. Next one on the series, we're getting to the top 10.
We're in the top 10.
The first one there is book 10, is the Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee.
Have you read that one?
Also, a book that we have not read. The first book here, though, is Jade City. It feels like a book that I've heard of before. It looks like it's a book about 2 crime syndicates that control the island of Kekan, the only place in the world that produces a rare magical jade, which grants those with the right training and heritage with superhuman abilities.
It sounds like an awesome book.
Yeah, it sounds really fascinating. Maybe
it
one
also has
to check out.
2 prequels, because when I go into Goodreads, it says book 0.5 and book 0.75, and then book 1.
Wow, how about that? I mean, it's got a 4.09 on Goodreads, and my general rule of Goodreads is any book above a 4, I'll take a look at it. I'll read it. Yeah. I think it's good enough to read. But I am interested. It was published in November 7th of 2017, so it's relatively new.
There's 6 books though.
Are you surprised by that? Like that's a lot?
That's not a very long period of time.
Yeah. So she's a quick writer.
The most recent prequel, The Jade Shards, is published in 2023.
Yeah, it looks like she writes about every 2 years, and the prequels she was writing in between years.
That's way cool. So I have a question for you then. So let's say we were going to take this on, the Greenbone Saga. Would you start with the first prequel, or would you start with book 1 and read the prequels later?
That is a good question. I would probably read through some reviews and look for people's suggestions online. Because usually people have like a good order. You got to start here. You got to do this. But for me, if I didn't have any of that, I would probably start with book 1 and then go back to the prequels. I feel like it's almost like a Star Wars thing, where you have to start with A New Hope.
Star Wars too.
Yeah, you got to start with A New Hope. You got to like discover that Darth Vader is Luke's father, like from that moment.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
Jeez.
But it's just yeah, what were you going to say about that?
I think I'm with you there, but that means we're going to rely heavily on our commenters. You guys are awesome and usually help us out with these types of things. If you've read the Greenbone Saga, should we start with book 1 or should we start with the Jade Setter, which is the prequel? Like, I don't know. But you're right. I probably would go to people that have read it and say, would it help with context to start with the prequels? Like, maybe it's just, oh yeah, it would set up so much better. Like, it's just different. Who knows? But the people that have read it would know. So if you've read it, let us know.
Awesome.
Time for book 9. Book 9 in the series is called Malazan by Steven Erikson. Not one that I've read. I feel like I'm more of an 11 to 15 kind of a guy apparently in this list.
That's your style, huh? You only like books that are not top notch.
These series are insane. Like I'm looking at this Malazan series, the Fallen series, 16 total works.
Oh my goodness.
What?
That is so many.
How am I supposed to read any of this?
It looks like there's 10 books though. I wonder if they're counting the other books as extra.
It says 10 primary works, 16 total works.
Oh my goodness. The first one was published in 1999. This is actually one that I've heard booktubers talk about regularly.
Okay.
And they seem to really recommend this book and have high recommendations and a praise for it. And so I'll give you the first little bit of the synopsis. We'll react to that. It says that the Malazan Empire simmers with discontent, bled dry by interminable warfare, bitter infighting and bloody confrontations with the formidable Rake and his I don't know these names. This is the hard thing. Reading them, gotta guess. It's like ancient and implacable sorcerers. I'm like butchering.
Okay, so it's
this.
magical. It's a magic system. Okay.
So, anyways, looks interesting.
A couple of tidbits for you
on
this Goodreads page that I've noticed that I thought would be interesting before we continue into like the book itself.
Let's hear it.
One of them, the ratio of ratings from book 1 to book 10.
Ooh, let's hear it.
122,000 ratings for book 1, but for book 10, only 30,000 ratings. That is what we call a drop-off, which means 4 times as many people read book 1 as read book 10.
Wow.
Is that a good thing?
Well, where does the drop-off happen?
The biggest drop-off by far is book 1 to book 2.
Book 1 to book 2. Huh?
It's almost 50,000
But what is interesting, though, is that also looks like it's the biggest drop in review as well. So, or it's the biggest change. So the first book is rated a 3.92 in stars. The second one jumps up to 4.27.
But no one gets there because no one liked the first book.
Yeah, because no one really enjoyed the first book. But then the rest of the books stay highly rated.
And some of them even get better. Well, I mean, you would assume because the author is getting better.
Yeah.
Like you think about this, we're talking about a span of 12 years.
So if we had to guess, this is a series that you just have to get through the first book.
You have to get through the first 2 to really probably get your momentum in the series.
True. That's probably
if you have read the Malazan series, the Fallen series, whatever it's called, by Steven Erikson, let us know if we're accurate in our random guess assumption that the first book is not as good, but getting through the second book gets you there. I think that feels like a pretty accurate assumption, though.
Of course. Next one on the list is the Discworld, number 8, Discworld by Terry Pratchett. This is one that I have been very interested in reading.
Okay.
What's cool about these books, and I hear lots about them, it's always on people's top 10 lists on best books of all time. Terry Pratchett has lots of books.
I was going to say that. You know what I'm going to say about this? 41 primary books in this series.
41.
Yep.
And what people tend to like from these books and what I've seen is they almost are written in metaphors about the world and what they're saying about politics and people and their interactions and just the nature of humanity in general. But they're also interesting. I've heard he's a funny writer in the way that he writes too. It's humorous, comedy, and things like that. So people have a lot of really, really good things to say about them. They're all very short from what I've heard, and they can all be read in any order you want. There is no order to start from. That's kind of cool.
But they're also, like, I would assume if someone's throwing 41 or 40 whatever books into a series that they're cranking them out because they're shorter, right? These are not shorter. Most of these are about 400 pages long.
Oh, really? Well, I mean, Okay, shorter as in it's not 1,000 pages like a Sanderson
No, but
book.
I would expect them to be like 220 pages if he's cranking out 41 of these.
Yeah.
But he also published them literally from 1983 to 2015.
Wow.
That is a career, I tell you what.
I know. I think he's passed away as well.
But that is, so 1983 to 2015.
And if you want...
32 years? 32 years in the same series.
Wow. I know. That's a long time.
That's kind of what Brandon Sanderson's expecting to do, too.
You're right. Except with all 1,000-page books.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's passed away, and that's one of the reasons why he doesn't write anymore.
Back in 2015 when that last book, that same year, the last book was published.
Okay,
yeah.
I was right. I'm right. If you want a recommendation on what book to start with, even though I haven't read it, I've heard from Sanderson in one of his videos. I heard from Sanderson myself.
Oh, yeah, no, when you were chatting with him last Tuesday.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, when we play Catan at night.
Yeah, it's great. During his book writing time.
Yep.
So, of course, that happens. Book 8, called Guards is one of the ones he recommends to start with. So maybe that'll be the one that we check out.
Maybe it is.
Yeah. This one is...
I always take recommendations from Brandon.
Yeah.
Usually works out well.
We're on a first name basis. 376 pages, so not too long either.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they're serious books, but I haven't even touched that
376
series.
isn't bad, though.
No. It's a very doable book, but I'm saying he's not skimping out.
Oh, yeah.
He's writing serious novels.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying they're too long. I'm saying they're definitely long enough that he's not jipping us on page count here.
For sure. I'm just trying to scroll through and see if I can find the highest rating. Guards is the highest one I saw so far. Men at Arms is also pretty high, 4.4 on that one. I think
there are quite a few of them in the fours, which I mean that's your level of recommendation for Goodreads.
The truth. Yep, those are the highest ones I saw. 4.5, Night Watch.
So there might be a couple in that series we dive into. So that'll be fun. If you've read those, let us know. We haven't yet, but hey, there's plenty of time left on this channel. I tell you what.
That's right.
Subscribe so you don't miss those opportunities. Okay, let's dive into number 7, Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb. Which exactly what we were talking about in last 2 episodes when we were getting hyped for Dragonsteel. I think we published that a couple weeks ago. And we're talking about how some of the panelists have been announced, and Robin Hobb is one of those panelists.
She is going to be at Dragonsteel. Okay?
Absolutely.
People have been telling us that this is a massive deal, that she's an incredible author, does really great stuff. Sanderson has also said it when he announced it. So maybe this is the book to read. Maybe this is the one we have to learn.
We might need to. It's got a prequel. So the first one's a prequel, and then book 1, just published in 1995, Assassin's Apprentice.
Wow.
336,000 ratings. That is a lot. And again, I'm just going to keep mentioning this. These series are huge. 16 primary works in this series. 16.
Oh my goodness.
It's a lot. But they do seem like really cool books and very highly rated. Almost all of them, not all of them, but almost all of them in the mid-4s. Only a couple dipping into the 3s. Maybe a little bit of a book 9 to book 11 issue.
Yep.
But yeah, we're definitely reaching some high 4s. Assassin's Fate book 16 got a 4.65 with 41,000 ratings. 41,000 people made it to book 16.
Wow.
Is that not just, that makes you think, okay, yeah, this is going to be good.
How did the review count hold up?
Review of book 1, a great question.
Yeah.
Review of book 1 had 336,000 ratings.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not going to include the prequel because that kind of throws things off a little bit. Some people don't like reading prequels. But the final book, book 16, received 41,000 ratings.
Wow.
So we went down from 336 to 41.
Wow. And does any book get a massive
So that's an
drop-off?
88% drop-off.
Wow.
That's pretty high.
But I wonder how often that happens, especially with these really long series, right? Because you have to commit by the time you get to the end.
Yeah.
Like you can't just jump into the last book, even if it's the best.
Well, it's going to happen. They're going to have this curve. I wonder if it's even just review fatigue. People are like, I read the first book and I got into it, but I'm not going to write a review for every single book. I mean, we've seen this even with books that we've reviewed on the channel. Where like the first book in a series is the most popular, gets the most views, and then subsequent videos that we'll make, or even for sequels and things like that, just don't do as well.
They start to tail off.
Exactly. And I wonder if it's because less people are viewing them, just because there's less hype for a second, third, fourth book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because you have the potential of the entire world to have read a first book.
Yep.
But then once you get to the first book, you have that pie of everyone who's just read the first book. And that pie keeps getting smaller.
Always
going to
be a subset. Like, its maximum audience is the people who, like, it's never going to be higher than that.
Yeah.
Almost never. It's always going to be some subset of it. So, yeah, makes sense.
Interesting.
The law of percentages is beating us this time.
There it is.
So that's definitely going to be on the list. I know we've wanted to read something by Robin Hobb, especially before Dragonsteel. So we'll get that on the list.
Number 6, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan.
Ah, classic.
I know, it is a classic. And a lot of people rate this as their number 1 book of all time. I see this a lot of booktubers. Hot take, it is not the number 1 book of all time.
I was going to say, is it a specific book or is it the whole series?
I think what happens here is, so this series starts with the Eye of the World. And it's about the Dragon Reborn, and it's got so many books. How many books does it have in the series? 15 primary works. I told you there's a lot in this series.
That is a lot.
Yeah, Sanderson wrote through book 14. That's where he ended. But anyways, a lot of people, I'm assuming, are seeing that they have this as their favorite book because it's nostalgia. This was some of people's first adult fantasy, is what I'd call it, books that they were reading. They loved it growing up. A lot of the people that I read that I talk with who have this as their number 1, it's because it was their very first. Kind of like it would be for you and me an Aragon type series.
Oh, yep.
Like, we love those books because it was some of the first that we read.
So great.
So good. But this one, I think that's the reason. Because you read it, when I'm reading it, I started with Sanderson. I started with some of these other books. And I just think that the world building of Wheel of Time is fantastic. And it's very deep on all the characters. But I think it is very obsessed with the world building. And it's not as engaging of a story and fast-paced as I like as compared to a Sanderson book. Which some people say with those last 3 books that Sanderson wrote, they love them with how he took the world of Robert Jordan and moved it forward.
I was going to mention that because it says still by Robert Jordan in all of these books.
So I think what happened is he actually had the end planned out, and Sanderson worked with Robert Jordan's wife to make sure those last books were published in the way.
Oh, and if you click on them, it's they're 2 authors by Robert Jordan and Brandon Sanderson. So
yeah, very
that
cool.
Helps.
Very cool. There's some cool stories too about
crazy
Sanderson.
to have a series that you're like, it must be finished.
I know, and people had to know how it ends.
Else.
Yeah, because people just were so into these characters and everything. He gave it a good finish. Actually, some people say it's probably good that Sanderson finished it because he was able to give it a completion. Because people probably would have wanted them to just go on forever.
Yeah, and it needed to
have a resolution.
Yeah.
So
that's a great transition though, because book 5 is written by Brandon Sanderson, or series 5, I should say. This whole thing is kind of a list of groups of books.
Yep.
But Mistborn, the Mistborn trilogy. I'm assuming Era 1. But number 5 on this fantasy list, and I like that it made top 5. I'm happy about that.
Do you think it deserves it?
I think it deserves it. I think we'll get into some interesting ones, other ones in the top 5 that I haven't read. But yeah, I think it's definitely a top 5er.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Especially because it gets people into the world and it's like well written, it's fast paced enough that it's an easy recommend.
I would agree with that. And my biggest reason for why this is a top 5 book is because this is, what do they call it? Like a gateway book for people to get into fantasy. This is a book that I recommend to people all the time. If they haven't even read fantasy before, start with Mistborn. All of a sudden, they are obsessed with fantasy. It is expanding the tent of fantasy lovers, which means we can get more books, more adaptations. The more fans that we have, the better. And these books are fantastic anyways. As a series, these first 3 books, before I read some of the Stormlight books or other books that Sanderson wrote, these first 3 books were my favorite books of all time after having read them. I just thought the story was just fantastic, well put together. The characters I thought were deep. Some people disagree with me on that, but I thought it was awesome. I really loved it.
Disagree with us, but hey,
we love to hear it. Let us know what you think. So, massive fan of those.
We
books.
are a huge fan, and we have reviews of all of those on. Actually,
we do not.
Era 1, we don't.
No.
Era 2, we have on the channel.
We do. Which Mistborn
we have some
Era
work
2,
to do.
Not as good as Era 1.
It's not as groundbreaking as Era 1.
Yeah, I would say when it's talking about
awesome.
Mistborn in here, it's got to be just talking about Era 1 when I'm considering a top 5.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't say that Era 2...
It is talking about Era 1. It's got to be talking about Era 1.
Yeah, because
if you click on it in Goodreads, though, it does include all of the second series as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't
say... It says
that
the 7 primary works.
Yep, and I wouldn't say that Era 2 drags down Era 1 or anything. It's just, it's pretty good, but... Era 1 is just something else.
Oh, yeah. That's well worthy of top 5.
Yep.
Number 4 by George R.R. Martin, which means you probably already know it is A Song of Ice and Fire. Is the book. I have not read this.
Nope.
We had an interesting conversation about this book in our 1,000 subscriber Q&A if you want to go check that out. But yeah, it's not one that I've read.
Yeah, this is a Game of Thrones and massively popular, very interesting. People love it. The biggest reason why I have not read it, I've watched some of the first few episodes of Game of Thrones, and guys, I just can't get into Grimdark. I can't. I watch it, and I've said this before, I just cannot get into a book where there is no one to root for. There is no one that I liked in that series, okay? Every single person that you wanted to like, I'm like, oh, it turns out they're a bad person. They do bad things, or they like have bad intents and all these things. And I think that's the idea of Grimdark, though, is that everyone's living a very real life where there's no hope and everyone's sad and stuff like that. That's not the life I want to live in, but
That's not what I read fantasy for.
No, for sure. You want to be inspired and you want to learn about, like, go to another world that takes you to someplace exciting. And those books, well, I've heard that they're very good on the political game and strategies and twists and turns. Just not my style. Not my style.
I actually, so even though I haven't read these personally, I do want to share with you, this is the worst review drop-off I think I've ever seen.
No way?
Book 1.
Yeah.
2.5 million ratings.
That is a ton, by
Book
the way.
7, 2,000.
2,000?
2,000 ratings.
Oh, wait, no. That's got to be because it's not published yet.
Well, somebody did. Somebody rated it. 2,000 people did. Even if I gave you, okay, fine, let's do book 6, 12,000 ratings.
Yeah.
That's still 2.5 million.
12 book 6, The Winds of Winter is what it's called.
That's still a massive.
Yep. Unless that one's not published either. Is that one published?
How are people reviewing books that aren't published? Maybe this is the controversy of Goodreads.
Maybe.
We've uncovered the secret controversy. People are reviewing books they've never actually read.
Oh, you know why?
Why?
So
I have to know.
There's a big controversy too. I think that George R.R. Martin's getting in that trouble here where he has not finished a book that's supposed to be published for a very long time.
Okay.
So I think maybe that's this one. Yeah.
Is a forthcoming 6th novel in the epic series.
Oh my gosh. So this person wrote, want to read for book 6. So that's got to be why. He said, update. Oh, my sweet summer child. Do you remember what it was like to have such hope, such confidence? 2015. It was going to be your year. But as of summer 2022 fades and the leaves begin to fall, it was clear that no one will be reading the book even now, some 7 years later in 2022. What could have been?
This person should write the book.
I know. He probably wrote it in the style of the book. It's got to be.
Okay, so
That's
the review
hilarious.
drop-off was pretty bad because they haven't actually come out yet.
Yeah. So the real drop-off, though, the Dance with Dragons was 660,000, which is not terrible.
Still, yeah.
Published in 2011? Are you kidding me? These
Still
poor people.
Yeah, it's an 80% drop-off.
Yeah.
So it's actually pretty well what we saw in other books.
Oh my goodness, dude.
Very interesting.
I don't know, dude. It is so hard to trust an author when they will not finish a series. Like I don't know. I just can't get into a series that
if it's not done yet. Same thing. I mean, Name of the Wind.
We did read the first book, and I was pushed like into it because people were like, you gotta at least read the first book. It's still so good, even though it hasn't finished, and it was pretty good. But
we're not gonna read 2, knowing that 3 is not out.
We're boycotting it until it is written.
That's the power of the booktube.
That's right. Book number 3 is the First Law World Series. Again, this is a book that we've not read, but this is by Joe Abercrombie.
We were just talking about Grimdark.
Yes, this is also a Grimdark series, and apparently more highly rated than the Game of Thrones itself, the Grimdark series that everyone knows. So,
wow.
I know.
Again, I don't think I'm ever going to get into Grimdark.
Yeah.
It's just not my vibe.
You just don't get the hope that's there. But I have heard that this is a series, if you're going to read Grimdark, this is probably the one to read. I can't remember if it was Bookborn that was saying this, or in
We've heard a lot of Joe Abercrombie stuff from Tudor Ramble as well.
Yeah, they say it's just really good. I think they have some... I can't remember why they said it was so good. Let us know in the comments on why we should read this book and if we should get into it. Is it better than the Game of Thrones? Is it more interesting? Is Vera... We just did a podcast with her. Did she read Joe Abercrombie? Can't remember.
Ooh.
I know it. She's done The Witcher. I've seen a lot of her Witcher videos.
We've definitely seen
and
The
stuff
Witcher
like that,
ones.
but interesting. But this one, yeah, a lot of works in this one.
And that's
as well.
number 3. Number 3 on the which... Okay, number 2, and I think this should be a surprise to no one. Yes. Number 2 on this list, Middle-earth Universe, which I've never heard it called that, but it's basically the Lord of the Rings series.
Oh, yeah,
but
for sure.
They probably call it Middle-earth so they can include The Hobbit in it, because some people don't include those Hobbit books in the original Lord of the Rings series.
True.
Whatever you would like to say about it, but the Lord of the Rings, absolutely phenomenal series.
Yeah, incredible. It's just so deep. It was really what created the genre of epic fantasy and got everyone's inspired by that. All the authors of today have been inspired from The Lord of the Rings in some way. And
1937, The Hobbit.
I can't even imagine coming up with books like that back then.
Well, I mean, it has to have been written on a stone tablet.
I know. It's so old. Old.
That's 1937, man.
I think it's incredible. And I actually was recently, a few years ago, I was watching the movie Tolkien, and this is about his life. Have you seen it?
I haven't.
It's very fascinating. It talks about his experience in World War I and his participation in it. And it has a lot of really cool cutscenes, and whether or not they actually affected of how he wrote the book, I'm sure they did. But it just really gave you this sense of, wow, World War I really affected him as he wrote this book. You're seeing like scenes of people throwing flamethrowers all over the place, and then it cuts scenes to like a dragon like blowing fire, and then it has like the scenes of them throwing gas into the trenches, and then it just cuts to a scene of like Frodo and Bilbo like crawling underneath like gases and stuff like that. It's just crazy to like realize war is just something else. And then you have the Shire, which he probably thinks about as home and away from the war and like all the evils and stuff. Anyways, the movie was fantastic at really conveying that feeling of like what he was thinking as he was writing these books, and the kind of genius behind him, especially with his creation of his own language for writing these books.
That type of thing, like especially that old, but to really create a series that is so much its own universe that people can really dive into. Like, you think Lord of the Rings and the fans that have come from that, I think that it was incredible that he was able to create his own world. And so many authors have come from that and created their own universes and their own metaverses and worlds, but it does feel like an original way of writing that came to the world.
For sure.
Okay,
and go ahead.
One question, because I know you've seen this video.
Yes.
Movie. Sorry, documentary. Something like that. It's, I have heard so many times Tolkien and Tolkien.
Oh man.
And I can't make sense of it.
It depends on if I'm saying it alone or with J.R.R. I don't know how you're actually supposed to say it. Whenever I say J.R.R. Tolkien, I say Tolkien. But then if I say just Tolkien at the end, I want to say Tolkien for some reason.
I have heard both so many times that I don't know what's right.
I know.
And I've never looked it up.
You should let us know in the comments how you say it, if you can even convey that in the comments somehow.
I bet you can. I bet you guys can figure it out.
That's right.
But I really want to know, so let me know.
Yeah, let us know. The last thing I was going to say, I have this version of the Lord of the Rings. Absolutely beautiful. Has a lot of his own artwork that he did. You can just tell that he has just had such a passion for these books. And what I just love about it is you hold this book and you see all of his own artwork for it, and you think, this is just a work of art. It is a masterpiece, this book, and everything about it. So it's just easily one of the greatest of all time. No question. Nobody even argues with that.
Nobody's disputing that.
Nobody's disputing that. No. He's amazing. So obviously has to be up there in the number 1 or 2 spot. But what may be a surprise.
What is this? Super interesting, and I want to kind of give it a little bit of excitement, a little bit of, pizzazz, because better than Tolkien's Middle-earth universe, which is number 2, we have a different book in number 1.
People are saying his name in the same breath as Tolkien.
It's wild.
Crazy that this is here. And this is only beaten by 9 votes. Very close.
Wow. And it is?
The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here Maybe not first, but most recently.
Most recently. Yeah. And it had to be, right? We just talked about Mistborn.
We've hyped
fantastic.
it up so much.
And then what's better than Mistborn is The Way of Kings.
The Stormlight Archive.
The Stormlight Archive. As you can see, this channel, we talk a lot about Brandon Sanderson, and there's a major reason for it. He's written epic fantasy that, like we said, is expanding the tent, bringing more people into fantasy, helping them love it. What I love most about the Stormlight Archive is how deep the characters are.
Yep.
Every single character, you feel like you can understand them. They make sense, and you learn about their drives. You're learning yourself. You're learning about leadership and the good and evil and everything. It's fantastic.
One of our favorite series of all time.
Yes.
Absolutely. We are so pumped for Wind and Truth to come out at Dragonsteel Nexus. If you're there, if you're going, let us know. Catch us while we're there. But it's going to be the most exciting event of the year for sure.
For sure.
And it's because everyone loves this series. And okay, let me tell you this. These books are incredibly long, right?
Yep.
Basically 1,000 pages each one. But the review drop-off is only 70% compared to the average of others at 80-85%.
Wow. So you lost 70% of reviewers?
Yeah, you lose 70% of reviewers from book 1 to book 4. But they're so long. There have to be more. You would expect there to be more people that don't go and read the next book and you continue down the line. But this is even better.
That's fascinating. The other interesting fact, too, is that the book 2 in the series is, at least last time I checked, was the highest rated Goodreads book with like more than 10,000 reviews or something like that.
Wow.
Which is incredible. It has a 4.76 on Goodreads with 368,000 ratings. That book is phenomenal, by the way. Loved that book.
Absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. You guys need to check out our other videos. We are preparing, like you said, for Wind and Truth by rereading all of the Stormlight Archive and the other Cosmere books. Next book on the list is Oathbringer, but if you missed the first 2 books, we have The Way of Kings and the Words of Radiance videos that we've done in the past. So look for those.
Definitely check them out. They're good, and we'll do the Oathbringer, like Marty was saying, over the course of probably 4 parts, and we'll do almost like a read-along. So if you're reading it with us, preparing for Wind and Truth to come out, enjoy those parts as they come out, as you're reading it as well. It's a pretty fun way to join the cool book club.
For real, for real. So I think that wraps it up. Top 15 books as said by the internet. I think it's a pretty good list. Sounds like there's some books that we have to read.
I'm actually surprised at how many in that middle section, kind of like that 6 to 10, that I hadn't even heard of before.
Yeah.
But I would probably flip the 6 to 10 with the 11 to 15 in my mind because I've read those ones. But really insightful. And I think especially reading through the comments from this video is going to be a blast to see what you guys think we should read next, what should be on our TBR list, because there's some cool books in here. Even the plots, I think I'm excited about.
Very excited. So remember to like and subscribe, see what we're reading next. Let us know what we should read next, and so you can catch it when we read it. Make sure you're subscribed, and we'll catch you in the next chapter.